My name is Jeff Kovalik-Plouffe. I was a recipient of a living donor for a liver transplant, which I received from my sister. And I have about 60% of her liver inside me, and things seem to be going pretty well so far. I've had some autoimmune issues since I was 18 years old. I went to university to play basketball, and I got almost immediately diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. I had to take some time off of work and school for a few years and deal with the issues that came from that. Around 2005, I met with a new doctor, a liver doctor, who diagnosed me with primary sclerosing cholangitis, which is a degenerative disease of the liver. And since then, up until 2019, we were managing it with just the different types of medication, different doses, that type of stuff. And in September of 2019, I started to notice that I was getting a little jaundiced around the eyes and from my skin. I was working on a federal election campaign at the time, so when I was over, I went to see the doctor again. After running some tests, they noticed that my bile ducts were getting significantly narrower than they were before. So we started this regimen of inserting stents into the bile ducts to prop them open so that everything would flow properly. So we were doing that for around a year. Every 3 months I'd go in, and it's a fairly easy procedure. It takes about half an hour at a time. And things were going not bad. I was still starting to feel a little more fatigued than normal, and the jaundice wasn't really going away, but we felt like it was under control at the time and manageable. In November of 2020, I woke up early in the morning with this really sharp pain on my sides around the liver. And earlier that year, I had one of the bile ducts gotten infected. So I spent a couple of days in the hospital. And the pain was similar to that, but significantly worse and a little bit different, but definitely worse. So I went to the hospital here in Winnipeg, and after going through the emergency room process, dealing with COVID-19 and all of that, it was a drawn out experience. It took almost 24 hours to get seen. And from there, they did some tests, and they told me that my gallbladder had almost perforated, that had been extremely infected. So they couldn't do any surgery on it immediately because of this infection. So they inserted a tube of drain into my right side. And I had that for about 3 to 4 months, where it would just drain out the bile and drain out the infection. And I was on a heavy dose of antibiotics until February of 2021, when I was finally able to get gallbladder surgery. And when they went in to remove the gallbladder, the doctor, who had also liver transplant experience, was trained at the University of Toronto, just noticed how deteriorated the liver had become. So after I got out of surgery and feeling a little bit better a day or so after, she let me know that I would now need to start the process of looking for either a living donor or putting myself on the list for a deceased donor to get a new liver. There had been talk of this in the past with the doctor, but it never really came much. But with this new thing going through the gallbladder and everything, it became a lot more real very quickly. So my family and I started to look through what the process could look like and how do you go about getting on the list. And if someone's willing to be a donor, how do they go about doing that? So I talked to some family and some friends, and I had about 3 or 4 people who were willing, at the time, to go through the process and see if they would be a match. My sister was one of those people, so we started with her. And one of the drawbacks of the program, I think, especially when you're waiting for a liver, is that you can only do one possible donor at a time. So you go through the whole process with someone, and if there isn't a match, or if the person changes their mind, or something changes in health situation or whatever, you have to go through the whole process again with a new person. We were very lucky that we were able to go through all the tests and making sure that we were healthy enough in terms of being able to receive the liver and also being able to donate it. But the only person that we went through the process with was my sister, and she was a match without any really real conditions there. So knowing that was very, I'd say, helpful for us, but also at the same time, I had some serious reservations about her doing that. I was just concerned that if something was to happen to her. She has some children, husband, all of that. I would have felt very guilty that someone was sacrificing themselves for me. So I wasn't necessarily in love with that idea, but that's ended up what we went through, and that's how we really get through it. I obviously am very thankful that happened, and that she was willing to do that, but I wasn't thrilled that I was going to be the person I would rather prefer to be maybe someone we didn't necessarily know, or possibly even a deceased donor, but a living donor. That's a really big sacrifice for someone to make. These are both surgeries. A lot can go wrong. Luckily, my sister didn't. But when you go through something like this, anything can happen, and you kind of have to prepare for that mentally. It's going to be difficult, though. Once we found out that we were matched, and we went about trying to schedule the surgery as soon as possible, and we were able to get that done in January this year. It's pretty long. There was a lot of meetings with, so we live in Manitoba, obviously. They don't do these type of surgeries here. They only do kidney transplants here in Manitoba. For liver donations, you have to go to the University of Toronto, so we had to meet a bunch of doctors. They had to go through a lot of different tests to make sure that we were obviously compatible, but also that our bodies could handle this type of surgery. And then there's a committee at the university and the hospital that decides when someone should be listed as a possible recipient. So that took like 4 or 5 months. I think that was around mid-July last year when I got the official word that I was on the recipient list. And then from there, there's 2 ways about doing it, depending on how severe your condition is. If you have a living donor match, you can go through that process. But if you don't, then you list it based on severity and availability. We finished going through all the processes and tests, and as a recipient, I was kept in the dark about a lot of things in terms of what they were discussing with my sister in terms of timelines and all that kind of stuff. So for me, that was a little frustrating. It was easier because we can communicate with each other. So if someone was speaking to her, she can speak to me about what they were talking about. So we had like a wide overview of the situation. But for people who aren't in that living donor situation, or that they're not maybe as close to the donor as we are to each other, I think it could be very frustrating, the waiting game, especially once the surgery was scheduled. She knew the date, I would say a good 4 to 6 weeks before it was confirmed with me. So we'd started making plans around that date, but no one had actually informed me of that officially. And then because we have to travel, there was a lot of things that we had to go through, get support people to travel with us and help us, and booking living accommodations in Toronto, and all that kind of stuff. So we actually ended up setting up a GoFundMe page for that. A couple of our friends helped get that off the ground, and was actually much more successful than thought. But I also didn't really feel very comfortable doing that. I didn't really want to ask people for help in that situation, but we did go through with it, and it was very successful. So to everyone who donated, I can't really say anything that's more meaningful than just thank you. Their help and support was beyond measure for us, I would say, and it was overwhelming also to see the kind of support you get from people. All of my interactions were either on the phone or through or medium like video conferencing or something of that nature. We were able to do all the tests that I needed here in Winnipeg, which was helpful. From what I understand, a lot of that had to do with the pandemic as well, that they didn't want to necessarily send people traveling for no reason, especially when they're in a condition where they're not 100% healthy. So we did as much as we could virtually or through the hospitals here in Winnipeg. But I'm not sure if they're going to continue that process moving forward, or if they will want to assess people in person for the next little bit once the restrictions are starting to get lifted and all that type of stuff. But personally, I was able to get everything done here in Winnipeg, and that did make it a little easier, just on me physically and mentally and financially as well. Yeah, all the doctors were very easy to deal with, and they answer all of our questions. And there was also some support groups that we were able to join into and hear other people's situations and what they've gone through as well. So there were those options. There's online communities where you can join, Facebook groups and that type of stuff. I didn't actively participate in that as much as probably I should have, looking back on it. I kind of wanted to just go through the experiences myself without getting maybe my perspective skewed one way or the other from someone. But those tools are out there, and I would, if I was to hopefully never have to do this again, but if something like that did come up, I would probably utilize those tools a lot more than I did. So I'm glad that we can talk about this today, and hopefully other people will see this and see that this is a realistic path for donation and recipients, for donors and recipients. Well, I was fortunate that I was able to leave the day before we had to check in to the hospital, and because of the pandemic, we were able to get Manitoba Health to cover an air ambulance type of situation. So we didn't have to go through security at an airport. We didn't have to get on a plane with 150 people or anything like that. So I was very lucky that we didn't have to get exposed to anything at the time, because it would have been really frustrating, I think, to go this far and have get a positive COVID test the day before, and then everything gets postponed. Still not the healthiest person in the world, so getting COVID at the time could have affected a few other things as well. So I was fortunate that way. So I think the doctors and everyone helped set that up. So when I got to Toronto, I checked into the hospital the next day, and the doctors and nurses met with me, and they went over everything or what was going to happen the next day, walked through the timeline, everything like that, and it was pretty straightforward. Actually, it wasn't very difficult. I had surgery before, so I knew what to kind of expect in terms of that type of thing, but they went over what expected recovery would look like and everything like that. So I was actually pretty optimistic of how things were going to go once I was actually in the hospital. And I know Julia, she checked in the next day, and by the time we were ready for the surgery on the 17th, I was actually feeling pretty confident that things were going to go okay. I remember the day out, getting mealed in, going through the process of getting everything hooked up and all that kind of stuff. I remember waking up, however long it was, maybe 10 hours later, recovery room, and just seeing I had this gigantic hole in my chest that was stapled together. So that was different. But otherwise, I actually felt pretty good when we got up. And the next day, some of the support workers at the hospital came around, and I was actually able to walk fairly easily. I felt pretty strong. I actually went to see my sister that day, and I felt like we were on a good path getting out of there in 10 to 14 days, which was the expectation at the time. Unfortunately, I got bacterial infection. It's called a C. diff. It's a hospital infection that affects your intestines and your stomach and everything like that. So also highly contagious. So you have to be isolated. You have to spend time in the isolation room. Anyone who comes in to see you has to gown up, mask, gloves, all that kind of stuff. You can't leave the room. So that was like that for a couple of weeks, where I was in isolation. I was going to the washroom 30 or 40 times a day with this. I couldn't really hold down food. I wasn't hungry. I went into the surgery around 172-ish pounds. And after the C. diff had run its course, I was down to 144, which I believe is the lowest that I weighed when I got home. But that also fluctuated when I was in the hospital as well, because I had another complication during the surgery. One of the bile ducts didn't get... there was a leak, I should say. There was a leak in one of the bile ducts, so my body was retaining a bunch of fluid, and from my heart all the way down to my feet. I couldn't leave the room because I was still in isolation, so just walking around and everything was very difficult. I essentially stayed in my bed for a couple of weeks. A lot of pain from the extra water waste. So I was complaining to the doctors about it. They had given me higher doses of painkillers to deal with that, and there was nothing that was really helping. So it was February 1st. I had the day in just excruciating pain. I have a high pain tolerance, but that was like a 20 out of 10. It was hard to breathe. Every time I could take a deep breath, I could feel my organs moving inside of me, if that makes sense. Hopefully no one ever has to go through that, but it was very painful. So after a while, getting looked over by the doctor, they decided that they wanted to do a second almost emergency surgery. So I found out about it in the morning, and within 4 hours I was back in the operating room again for the second surgery that they call a washout, which isn't extremely common, but it's also not rare. I think it's something like 20% of people who have this transplant surgery have to get a second washout surgery if something is up. So they had to reopen the wounds, go back in, fix the bile duct, and then clear out all this extra fluid. So at that point, I was actually scared more than I was for the first surgery. I just wasn't sure what to expect from that. It was a complication that they weren't really sure how we're going to be able to manage, because I was on a lot of antibiotics for the C. diff infection, and then I was also on the infection medicine to make sure that my body could handle the transplant. And those two medications aren't really friends with each other, so getting the dose right to make sure that both things were working at the same time was very difficult. So I was not feeling well, and then on top of that, to have the issues with the water retention and the bile duct leak. So I actually wasn't confident that that surgery was going to go well, and I was not that feeling very optimistic, to be honest, after the second, or going into the second surgery. But thankfully that actually worked. I think we're fine, that we're clean. Almost all of the water weight that I had just immediately had disappeared once I woke up from the second surgery, and that was on February 2nd, 2022. And then I was back into a recovery room. I still had the C. diff infection. So that was difficult again. And then I just had more complications in terms of water retention from legs on down. It was very difficult to walk. My ankles looked like Nerf balls. I couldn't really bend my legs flat or anything like that because there was so much swelling. And I had to go through that again for another week or so while being monitored after the second surgery. So in all, I ended up staying about 5 weeks in the hospital in Toronto, and then was transferred back to Manitoba for a day before I was released. A few complications as well. And once I returned home and in the hospital as well, I had 2 drains inserted into the folds of my sides by my ribs. And for a while there, they were draining 3 or 4 liters of fluid a day into these little ostomy bags, which were described as that. And the water just kept flowing. I was on some pills to help you, diuretics to help you get some of that extra water out of your system, but a lot more complications than I expected, but was happy that we were able to get everything under control once the C. diff had ran its course and I was able to stop taking the antibiotics. That made a big difference in how I felt and how I was recovering. I started being able to get a little more active around mid-May. And right now I feel pretty good. I feel better than I did at this time last year. But I wouldn't say anywhere near 100%. I get fatigued a lot throughout the day. I only do things for a couple hours at a time before I need to take a little bit of a break. And I think that's a natural, normal recovery process. I had 2 major surgeries within 2 weeks of each other. So if you're going through this and you're watching this and you think, so how are I going to feel 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road? I think it's just important to have patience with what's going on. That's not a strong suit of mine personally, but I've tried to get better at it over the last little bit. And just let your body naturally recover and take things at a pace that you can handle and not rush anything. For the first 3 months, I think, once I got back to Winnipeg, I was going for blood work once a week, and the doctors were checking the levels, and we were playing with some of the anti-rejection meds to get into the right zone in terms of blood levels and that type of stuff. So right now, I think we're on a pretty good dose. It hasn't necessarily caused any issues with me. I'm able to tolerate them. Like, I'm able to eat still. I'm able to sleep. I'm able to be active throughout the day. So the medicine isn't really a big concern for me. I've also been on different types of medicine for quite a long time, so I'm used to taking them at different times. So that's why I think I'm pretty lucky that I haven't had any adverse reactions to almost all the medicine that they prescribe so far. And then there needs to be an adjustment made. The doctor or a nurse will give a call, and we'll tinker with what's necessary. But these anti-rejection drugs I'll be on for the rest of my life, so I'm happy that they're working. There's a level of shock and confusion, or probably anger, fear that happens once you are told that you need this life-changing surgery. There's no guarantee that everything's gonna work out, so those are things that go through your head quite a lot. You wonder if you're going to be able to not only just survive the procedure, but if you do, what your quality of life will be like afterwards. You're going to be able to go back to doing things that you enjoyed for your life, or things that you want to do in terms of your career or your personal life, or generally, can you travel somewhere without worrying about, do I have to find a hospital? I'm lucky. I have a very good healthcare plan through work, but there's a concern how much medication is going to cost. So there's still a lot that goes through your mind in a very short period of time. And then you start the process of trying to find a donor, or going through the process of getting on the transplant list. And then all of those thoughts just drag out even longer over time. And I think it's really important to have support from however you go about getting support. It's talking to your friends or your family or other people who've gone through this procedure or gone through situations that are similar to this, so you can just get your emotions out and know that you're being supported from people, and that people care about you, and that you care about others, especially if you're doing a living donor. And like I did with my sister, I was also very concerned for her to go through the process. So having that network of support that you're able to just turn to when you need, I think is probably the most important thing that you can go through before and after the surgery. So I would just say it's important for people to just be open about how they're feeling, their concerns, their fears, all that type of stuff, and just be able to feel like you can discuss this with the people you're closest to and you trust. One thing that I was really concerned about, and that was just making sure that my sister was going to be okay through the whole process. I wasn't thrilled with the fact that she was going to be the donor, because she has 2 little kids and a husband and family and all of that stuff. So I probably would have preferred someone else maybe taking that risk instead of her. But one thing that I did do that I haven't really shared with anyone is right before the surgery started, the doctors were going over all the possibilities of what could happen and walking me through what to expect, and make sure you take deep breaths before the drugs are administered and you'll wake up whenever and all that kind of stuff. So I told them that I understood the risks and everything that goes along with it, but what I wanted them to tell me was that if anything did happen, complication-wise, that I needed an assurance from them that if I had to pick between myself and my sister to help and get through the surgery, I needed them to tell me that they would pick her. So they did that. I'm not 100% sure they were telling the truth, but they did it anyway to make me feel better. And I'm just really thankful and happy that nothing happened and that she's doing great now.